When it comes to iconic structures, the Brooklyn Bridge is undoubtedly one of the most famous in the world. But did you know that the Brooklyn Bridge only exists today because of the determination and resolve of one woman? You could say that she was the woman who actually saved the Brooklyn Bridge. The Gilded Age of the late 19th century was a period of immense industrial growth and technological innovation in the United States. From the railroad boom to the rise of the steel industry, to inventions that brought electrical lighting into people's homes and even the newly invented telephone of Alexander Graham Bell. It was a time that great men were credited for doing great things. It was also a time where great women may not have been fully acknowledged in their accomplishments. But all the same, there were women contributing to the advancement of the new technologies taking the country by storm. In the Gilded Age HBO series, we meet Mrs. Roebling in Season 2, Episode 5, when Larry Russell visits the home of the chief engineer, Washington Roebling, to find out just what is going on in the house. Seems no one has seen the chief engineer in a long time, but the house is a hive of activity that appears to be leaderless, even as the bridge continues on its course to becoming what was then called the eighth wonder of the world. It was called the eighth wonder of the world because the construction of the bridge that was going to bridge, yes, that's a pun, the boroughs of Manhattan and Brooklyn across the East River in New York City was a monumental task requiring immense skill and precision. It held the title of the longest steel suspension bridge being built at that time. So how was it that a woman turned out to be the one person who not only spearheaded the construction of the eighth wonder of the world for over a decade, but she also kept the dream alive against all odds? It all starts with the brutal winter of 1867 to 1868 that froze the East River, cutting off boat and ferry services that provided a crucial link between two of the busiest boroughs of New York City. When all movement stopped thanks to the compacted ice surfacing the river, someone came up with the plan for a bridge as a practical solution to keep things moving by aiming to connect Manhattan and Brooklyn through a structure built of steel and stone. This mastermind proposed the use of colossal stone anchorages, a concept never before seen in the United States. He also pushed the idea of utilizing steel instead of the conventional choice of iron, a forward-thinking solution that may seem obvious now but was truly groundbreaking at that time. The man behind the plan was a German-born American civil engineer by the name of John A. Roebling. John Roebling had already amassed a fortune through his groundbreaking inventions and use of iron cable in building suspension bridges around the United States, including the railroad bridge connecting the New York Central and Great Western Railway of Canada over the Niagara River, as well as the suspension bridge at Pittsburgh over the Allegheny River completed in 1859. His son, Washington Roebling, worked with him on that project, as he too had earned a degree in engineering to become a civil engineer just like dear old dad. But alas, on July 22, 1869, John Roebling died of tetanus from an on-the-job injury, and Washington was promoted to chief engineer of the Brooklyn Bridge. Washington took his father's plans and made several important improvements on the bridge design, which further developed bridge-building techniques at that time. But as luck would have it, or some say bad luck, Washington himself was injured from the work he put in on the job of building the Brooklyn Bridge. You see, Washington wasn't just a white-collar drawing up plans in the security of his home office. No, he was a hands-on kind of guy who needed to get in the trenches with his workers who actually built the bridge from under the water to the ground up and beyond, you might say. In this case, the trenches were something called caissons. You see, the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge involved the use of large pneumatic boxes called caissons for the underwater foundation work. The caissons were massive, airtight structures that workers entered to excavate the riverbed and lay the bridge's foundations that formed the basis for the two stone towers that support the Brooklyn Bridge. These pneumatic boxes were pumped full of pressurized air to create a dry working environment for the construction crews to dig out rubble and pour concrete. And Washington was not adverse to getting right in there with his crew. Sadly, working in compressed air boxes under the river resulted in Washington getting decompression sickness, also known as the bends, which shattered his health and rendered him unable to get out of bed. Yet he continued to oversee the Brooklyn project to successful completion, and all thanks to his wife Emily, who was no slouch herself when it came to the complex science of building bridges. Some historical accounts make it sound like Emily was just a secretary and a good organizer who kind of chipped in now and then and learned how to be an engineer along the way. But this was a very, very long way from the truth. This was the late 19th century when many men and women believed that women's brains weren't developed enough or that they were too weak. The idea that a mere woman could be even partly responsible for building one of the world's marvels was just too ridiculous to even begin to contemplate. But little did they know that Emily Roebling was a big science nerd from her school days at the Georgetown Visitation Convent School in Washington, D.C., where it didn't take long for her teachers to notice that she possessed a remarkable intellect and excelled in a wide range of subjects, most especially science. So in reality, it is no wonder at all that this particular mere woman could grasp the technicalities of structural engineering. In essence, Emily Roebling became the project manager upon her husband's illness, while her husband remained sequestered in his bedroom and could only watch the progress of the project through binoculars from the second-story window. David McCullough, author of The Great Bridge, The Epic Story of the Building of the Brooklyn Bridge, commented that, "Nowhere in the history of great undertakings is there anything comparable to Roebling conducting the largest and most difficult engineering project ever, in absentia." McCullough also wrote this about the lady engineer overseeing the project.
By and by it was common gossip that hers was the great mind behind the great work, and that this, the most monumental engineering triumph of the age, was actually the doing of a woman, which as a general proposition was taken in some quarters to be both preposterous and calamitous. In truth, she had by then a thorough grasp of the engineering involved.
As the times dictated, Emily was forced to be the silent engineer behind the project while also taking care of a sick husband and raising their son named John A. Roebling II, named after his grandfather. At one point, with Washington unable to physically participate, Emily found herself in the challenging position of convincing the powers that be that despite his health issues, her spouse was still fully capable of fulfilling his duties as the lead architect. There was no way that Emily was going to lose the family dream of engineering the eighth wonder of the world, so you can bet that she passionately addressed the American Society of Civil Engineers to defend her husband's role. She was the first woman ever to formally speak to the organization. Throughout her tenure, Emily personally attended the job site daily and discussed engineering details with construction supervisors. After their initial shock, the supervisors found her to be extremely knowledgeable and began to tell her about their daily problems and progress. On one occasion, a contractor had a question about how a part should be formed, and Emily made a sketch and explained each step in the process. When an important decision needed to be made, a delegation of officials would troop up to the Roebling house and present the facts to her. Whatever decision she made, it would be accepted as if it had come directly from the chief engineer himself. So you can see that she was far, far more than just the secretary who carried communications from home to work site, or the woman who was a good organizer and knew how her husband thought. Emily Roebling earned the admiration and respect of everyone involved in the project, from the workers on the ground to the top funders of the project. In December 1881, the ultimate compliment was bestowed upon her when she was invited to join a group of officials in walking across the partially completed bridge. This gesture, while an honor, also served as a test of her courage, as the walkway consisted of nothing more than a few planks laid side by side on the open bridge structure. Leading the party with a light breeze blowing, she engaged in conversation and remarked on the views. Upon reaching the New York side, almost 1,600 feet away, they toasted the woman who saved the Brooklyn Bridge with champagne. When the bridge officially opened on May 24, 1883, Congressman Abram S. Hewitt publicly praised Emily for her important role in its completion. Her husband also expressed his sentiments, stating,
"I want the world to know that you, too, are one of the builders of the bridge."
In 1888, the Roeblings moved to Trenton, constructing a large house. While Washington continued a quiet, secluded life, Emily remained active, embracing social engagements. She assumed the role of vice president of the Daughters of America and participated in various organizations. Additionally, she pursued legal studies at New York University, obtaining her degree, and became an advocate for women's suffrage. In 1900, Emily's health began to decline, culminating in a collapse in 1902. Diagnosed with stomach ulcers, she succumbed to stomach cancer on February 28, 1903. And right now is the perfect time for another awesome video about the fabulous, fierce, and feisty women in history.